Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you're struggling with that ultimate paradox of AI, how to use the incredible power of large language models, LLMs, while keeping them, anchored in reality, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah, we're talking about a problem of hallucinations, that massive headache of giving your LLM a reliable, a current and trustworthy memory.
And today we are cutting right through the noise. We're focusing on the one technology that really solves this, RAG, Retrieval Augmented
So you've
Generation.
got a whole stack of source material here, and it all points to this one critical market shift, which is that RAG is moving from like an experimental thing,
My prototype.
a prototype exactly, to the dependable enterprise standard for secure AI in 2026.
And that shift, from an optional feature to a non-negotiable standard, that changes everything for a business, right?
It does.
So our mission today is to really understand why RI is becoming mandatory, especially when you think about compliance and auditability. We're going to map out the exact architectural patterns and the governance blueprints you need to make it work.
Right. And the foundational takeaway here, the big reason RAG is suddenly so critical, is that by 2026, all the sources are saying accuracy is no longer just a quality goal.
It's more than that.
It's a fundamental compliance requirement.
Yeah.
For any assistant that's dealing with finance, legal, HR data, you have to have provable provenance for every single output.
And RG is the shortcut to that trustworthiness. When we look at the core appeal, it really hits four critical enterprise needs at once.
What are they?
You get answers that are accurate and current, you get drastically reduced maintenance, you get that provable provenance we mentioned through citations, and highly configurable privacy.
Precisely. And let's start there with the strategic case for why this is becoming standard operating procedure. It all, boils down to risk.
Risk mitigation and auditability.
Exactly. Auditability.
So walk us through, though. Why can't we just, use a massive pre-trained model and just hope it knows our internal policies?
Because that model's internal memory is a complete black box. You have no idea why it said what it said.
Right.
Argid fixes this. It grounds every single output in cited documents. Documents you already own and you've already approved.
So when it answers a question about, say, parental leave,
It has to point back to the specific PDF or the SharePoint link where it found that answer. That right there, that is the definition of provable provenance.
so if a regulator comes knocking,
Or an internal audit team,
yeah.
You have an immediate paper trail straight back to the approved source document. No questions.
that transparency is huge. But I think for a lot of teams, the biggest win is probably the speed advantage. If my product docs change every quarter, how does ARG handle that?
Oh, it's a massive time and cost saver. Think about the old way.
The legacy approach.
Right. If an HR policy changes, you had to do this expensive, month-long fine-tuning or even a full retrain of the LLM.
Which is just tons of compute time and staff time. And it means your AI is probably giving out dangerous, outdated information for months.
Exactly right. With Argy, the LLM itself doesn't change. It stays static. When a new policy comes out, you just refresh the index, the retrieval layer.
And that takes, what?
Hours, not months. It separates the brain, which is the LLM, from the memory, the index documents.
Yeah.
And that agility is just critical.
Okay, that makes total sense for speed. But what about cost? Because this was a surprising part of the sources we looked at. Everyone assumes you need the biggest, most expensive model out there.
Yeah, that's a common misconception. And this is where you see some real optimization. The sources all suggest that smaller, well-governed models, as long as they're paired with a really strong retrieval layer, they often outperform the giant models for this kind of specific enterprise Q&A.
Why is that? Is it because the retrieval part is doing all the heavy lifting?
Precisely. You're not asking the giant model to sift through its, vast, messy internal memory. Instead, you're feeding it maybe 5 or 6 perfectly curated paragraphs that contain the exact answer.
So the smaller model only has to summarize a tiny piece of content.
Exactly. So it generates a highly relevant answer much faster and much cheaper. You can get your inference costs way, way down.
That's a huge financial win. So how does this tie back into security and privacy, especially with things like GDPR and data residency in the UK and EU?
Well, privacy by design is kind of inherent to RAG. Because all your sensitive content lives inside your own corporate indices, you have absolute control.
So you can set access rules.
You can enforce role-based access rules right on the indices. If a user isn't allowed to see executive salaries, those documents are never, ever retrieved for them. And you can redact sensitive data before it even gets indexed.
And keep data in a specific region.
Yes. You ensure that UK HR data stays in the UK cluster. It never enters the public training data stream of the LLM provider.
So if that's the strategic win, the why, the next question is the how. How do we actually build this thing? Let's walk through the modern RAG pipeline step by step.
Sounds good. It's a seven-step journey, and it's important to know that if you weaken any one of these steps, your final faithfulness score, it's going to suffer.
Okay, step one is ingestion. We're registering sources, wikis, tickets, PDFs. But what makes this enterprise grade?
It's the prep work. It's all in the prep work. You have to clean and deduplicate the content. You have to strip out boilerplate, like email signatures or headers that will just confuse the model.
And metadata.
And absolutely critical, yes.
Yeah.
You have to label everything with robust metadata. Who owns it? What product does it relate to? What's its effective date? That metadata is the backbone of your entire filtering strategy later.
Okay, so that leads to step two, chunking and embedding. This is where things can go wrong, right? If you slice up a document badly, you just lose all the context.
This is the high-risk area, for sure. If you just, arbitrarily slice a 1,000-word document into 5 200-word chunks.
Our first chunk might end mid-sentence.
Exactly. Or the last chunk is just a footnote. So the source material really emphasizes smart chunking. You have to preserve the structure, the headings, the lists, the tables.
So each chunk is like a complete thought.
A meaningful thought unit, yes. Ideally, somewhere between 200 and 600 tokens. So it carries enough context to answer a question on its own.
That makes sense. Then those chunks get turned into embeddings and stored in a vector index.
Right. And that smart setup leads you right into the next step, which is retrieval. And at query time, we're doing a hybrid search.
Okay, break that down for us. Hybrid search. Sounds complicated.
It's actually conceptually pretty simple, but it's very powerful. It just blends semantic search.
Finding things based on meaning.
Right, conceptual similarity. And it blends that with classic keyword filtering.
Oh, I see. So you need both.
You absolutely need both. Semantic is great for tell me about our product guidelines. Keyword is for what's the SKU for Model 730A. You filter by meaning and by those metadata facets we added, like effective date.current.
Oh, okay. So if retrieval is already doing a hybrid search, why do we need the next step, the re-ranker? Why not just feed the top results straight to the LLM?
That is a great question. It's all about a speed versus accuracy trade-off. The first retrieval step is designed to be fast and broad.
So it casts a wide net.
Our very wide net. It might pull back, say, 50 potentially relevant passages. If you feed all 50 to the LLM, you waste time and you actually increase the risk of the LLM getting confused.
Or hallucinating.
Or hallucinating, yeah. So the re-ranker is a much smaller, lightweight model that just quickly assesses those 50 candidates and promotes the best 5 or 6. It's quality control.
Okay, so it's a pruning step. It ensures only the best stuff gets through, which brings us to step 5, augmentation.
Yes. This is where we build the final prompt. It includes that handful of retrieved passages plus explicit instructions and, most importantly, the guardrails.
Give us an example of a critical guardrail here.
The prompt has to be unforgiving. It needs to say something like, answer concisely, cite your sources, and if the evidence is missing from the context you were given, refuse to answer.
You have to explicitly tell it to say, I don't know.
You do. And that dramatically reduces its opportunity to just make stuff up. Then it does generation step 6, and that reply has to include verifiable citations, deep links.
And the final step, which I think a lot of people forget about, evaluation and monitoring.
It cannot be forgotten. This has to be continuous.
Yeah.
You're tracking core metrics automatically.
Yeah.
Like faithfulness, that's the percentage of statements supported by the context plus latency, and cost.
And manual review.
And you must be manually reviewing samples constantly to make sure the quality stays high as your data changes.
So that's the process. But these systems don't stay still. As the company scales, the architecture has to evolve, right?
Absolutely. It usually starts with what we call classic RAG, which is just simple vector search.
Yeah.
But real-world needs, they very quickly force a shift to hybrid RAG.
Combining vectors with keywords and that metadata.
Yes. That's non-negotiable if you need to filter by things like part numbers or policy versions. The metadata we added during injection is now doing real work.
And what happens when the questions get even more complex? When one question needs info from multiple documents?
That's when you move to multi-hop or agentic retrieval.
That sounds less like a search and more like a detective's journey. Give us a scenario for that.
Okay, so an employee asks, what's the exception for parental leave if I started after January 1st, 2024 in the Texas office?
Right. You can't answer that with one document.
No. The system has to plan a journey. Step 1, get the global policy. Step 2, see that it references state laws, so go get the Texas addendum. Step 3, cross-reference that with the start date to find the right clause. It's chaining multiple retrieval steps together.
Wow. Okay, that's a big leap.
It is. And the final advanced architecture we're seeing is structured RAG. This is where you mix your unstructured text with structured data, like tables or JSON.
So instead of trying to read a number from a paragraph,
The assistant just calls a tool. It runs a SQL query to get the fact. If you ask for current inventory, it queries the database. It doesn't guess based on an old PDF.
let's pivot to the practical side of this, the data prep. It really feels like 90% of a good RAG project is just getting the data right.
I'd say that's pretty accurate. The first step is having a robust source registry. You need to know exactly what your authoritative sources are. SharePoint, Confluence, whatever.
And when you convert those documents, you have to keep the structure.
You have to preserve the headings, the lists, the tables. The LLM uses that structure for context. And if you fail to attach the right metadata,
The hybrid search is useless.
completely useless. You have to attach things like owner, product line, region, effective date, and a security label. And on personal data, the rule is always minimize or redact it before you index.
Okay, so once the data is clean and tagged, the second practical step is locking down that prompting strategy with the guardrails.
You have to make sure the LLM understands its boundaries. The highest leverage point for reducing risk is combining that great hybrid retrieval with a very explicit guardrail prompt.
The one that says answer only from the context provided.
That's the one. And we know that limiting the context to just a handful of high-quality passages, the ones put in by the re-ranker, it reduces both latency and hallucinations, quality over quantity, every single time.
This all sounds incredibly powerful. So what are the immediate high-value places where this is making a real difference today?
We see 4 main applications cited over and over. First is the employee help desk. It becomes truly self-serve. Employees ask about HR policy, and the assistant gives them the exact clause, citing the document and section.
So HR spends less time on basic, repetitive questions.
Exactly. Second, field sales. They get instant, accurate info on product specs, pricing, competitor battle cards, all sourced from the latest documents.
So everyone's on the same page.
Everyone's using current approved language.
Yeah.
Third is customer service, surfacing warranty terms, known issues, troubleshooting steps. It leads to much faster ticket resolution.
And the fourth is that critical risk and compliance function. Okay, so once we've built it, how do we know if it's actually good enough for the enterprise? What are the quality gates?
This is where enterprise rigor really comes in. First, you have to establish a gold set, a representative set of questions with human-verified ground truth answers and references. That's your baseline.
Your baseline for trust. And what are the release gates? I mean, what are the metrics? Is like 80% accuracy good enough?
No, not even close. The sources indicate extremely strict quality gates. You track faithfulness, precision, recall, latency, cost. But the 2 hardest gates are for quality.
Which are?
For shipping any major change, the requirement is often faithfulness greater than or equal to 95% and hallucinations less than or equal to 2%.
Wait, 95% faithfulness? That is extremely high. Why that number?
Because if the model is generating statements that aren't supported by the context 5% of the time, that means it's lying too often to be trusted by a regulator.
It's fabricating information more than once in every 20 questions.
Which is completely unacceptable in a legal or financial context. That rigor, that is the true cost of enterprise trust.
That makes sense. That level of control builds confidence. Let's circle back to governance and trust, especially with UK and EU data rules.
Governance is all about transparency and access control. Your indices have to be protected by role-based access. You must log every query and every retrieved document with a retention policy aligned to GDPR.
And for the user.
For the user, the best way to build trust is just simple transparency. A brief, mandatory disclosure right next to the answer that says something like, answers are generated from internal documents dated between X and Y. It manages expectations instantly.
Okay, so that's a really comprehensive blueprint. What's the final takeaway for someone trying to implement this?
The summary is that RAG is the essential piece for giving your AI a trustworthy, compliant memory. It sources answers from approved documents, updates in hours, not months, and delivers verifiable citations every time.
So the advice is start small.
Start small, a single department's policies, 1 product line, measure against that 95% faithfulness target, and then you can scale the architecture.
And what are the 5 key pieces they need to get started?
You need a document store, a hybrid vector plus keyword search service. It has to be hybrid. An embedding model, an LLM, and good observability tools for evaluation and logging.
Excellent. Okay, time for the final provocative thought. The big question in AI right now is, does ARGA replace models with these massive context windows?
And the source material says explicitly, no.
This is where it gets really interesting. How do the two technologies interact?
Well, while long context windows are great, they help the LLM hold more in its short-term memory. RAG remains absolutely essential for three key reasons: data freshness, tight access control, and the explainability that compliance demands.
You can't audit a black box even if it's a really, really long one.
Exactly. So the central question for every enterprise in 2026 is no longer RAG or long context. The real challenge is figuring out how they must be seamlessly integrated,
How you blend them together.
how you blend the massive in-context learning of a big model with the external auditable memory that a RAG provides to achieve that genuine enterprise-grade trustworthiness. What does that blended architecture look like for your specific regulated data environment?
That's the challenge to solve. Thanks for diving depth with us.